And hello, everybody, this evening. So I have two really nice things that I'm able to share today. Um, First of all, don't lose sight that my little memoir is going to have its first birthday next month. But more exciting for me was that I found out it is in the Toronto Public Library. And what was really fun about that is that I applied last October. I don't know if any of you know this, but if you don't have a conventional publisher that has a publicity department or a marketing department, you can apply to the Toronto Public Library, but they have a rather detailed application process. And they're quite clear in the process that we get lots of applications and we're very discerning and we won't tell you whether we've picked your book or not. So I just let it go. And then I kind of got curious last month and I said, I wonder. And I was surprised and thrilled to see 4 copies in the Toronto Public Library. So please put it on hold, even if you don't read it. So what I want to do to celebrate that is just to read the preface from Don't Lose Sight, Vanity, Incompetence, and My Ill-Fated Left Eye. And the epigraph in the preface is from an American poet, Christian Wyman. They need not be Damascus raptures, our moments of soul. I spy with both my eyes. A giant rose in the deepest of purples, daubed here and there with celadon and washed with blue-gray. A red cabbage on my cutting board. One at a time, I snap off its outer petals, then briskly bifurcate the brassica with a sharp knife. Layered treasures line its interior, waves of garnet, veins of opal, sparks of amethyst, tourmaline. I reduce these cabbage gems to shreds and mound them in a pot. It's an ordinary stainless steel pot from IKEA, but it brims with wonder, and I with childish delight. William, come and see. My husband obliges, and together we contemplate the contents of the pot. Man, I say, is that not amazing? Forget seeing Machu Picchu. This meal in the making is my peak pleasure. Cut red cabbage calls up reverence and awe. How come? Because, Joni, I do know what I've got before it's gone. Because my ability to see this cabbage, all of it, in depth, without distortion, was in peril. Because I got lucky and I know it. Something happened and then something else and then something more. Many things seen and unseen, beginning with my left eye. The other thing I wanted to share was also kind of a nice thrill for me. The Canadian League of Poets has a poetry blast every day called Poetry Pause. And one of the poems that I submitted was in Poetry Pause on March 28th. Now, the poem is kind of a reaction to hearing peers say, cut out the function words. You can't have conjunctions. You can't have prepositions. You can't have, any of those things. And it didn't make any sense to me, especially since I was reading Robert Frost and Elizabeth Bishop. And at one point, I actually mechanically computed what percentage of their poetry was function words. And it was actually quite high. It was 30% or more. So this is modeled after Robert Frost's After Apple Picking, and it's called After Wordsmithing. My long, well-sharpened pencil scraping across the page where letters spill. And there's a coffee cup I didn't fill beside it. And there may be 2 or 3 light function words I left in anyhow. For I embrace what modern poets disavow. Determiners, conjunctions can sit right. Those hints of grammar wrought with ease by Frost, whose apple-picking poem imparts delight and tallies tiny words at minor cost. I scanned his poem for prepositions too, then took out all the function words I found. It weakened and its walls fell to the floor. But I was glad to see how it revived were I to add what once it had. An exercise that seems to underscore most cherished rules or dogma, nothing more.
So I'm just going to read a short excerpt. My novel is about, it's a woman's journey from patriarchal oppression to independence and self-fulfillment. My mother is hunched over at her kitchen table, concentrating on a puddle of dried lentils she's sifting through, checking to see if there are any wayward seeds or tiny bits of stone. She is wearing an oversized wool sweater, bald and faded, that had belonged to me when I was a teenager, and the toque my father always wore indoors towards the end because he was always cold. You didn't have any heat all night? You didn't tell me you didn't have any heat. You only said the furnace was making a racket. I didn't want to trouble you, my mother says. So instead, you spent the night freezing to death. Mama, Piki, why are you like that? My mother has always been that way, long-suffering, self-abnegating, never making waves. It was too late last night when the noise started. I would have woken up Vittorio and the children. Exasperated, I pick up the phone and call Consumers Gas. There was a 24-hour emergency number, but my mother could not have found it. Even if she had, she would not have been able to communicate her problem. A representative from the gas company promises to send someone within an hour. I'm sorry, Chatumeo, my mother tells me. I wouldn't have to bother you if your father were still here. I'm so glad you have Vittorio. Shadow male, gaudy male, beda mia, my breath, my heart, my beauty. My mother still calls me by the same terms of endearment she used when I was little. But I'm not a child anymore, and I can manage many things without Victor. I want to say, I hate your helplessness. I hate your meekness. I don't want to be that way, and yet I am. But I hope, I'm becoming more confident. The real estate courses are helping. It's a start anyway. A serviceman will be here soon, I say wearily. I will have to wait to explain the problem to the man. My mother takes away the lentils, and while waiting for the espresso machine to percolate, puts out tiny cups and saucers and miniature spoons that look like playthings, and a plate of cuccidata, fig-filled cookies that each year are part of her Christmas baking. They are my favorite. Would it be too much trouble, Corimeo, for Vittorio to take me to visit Lupapa e la nonna? She asks. E lo zio e la piccerida, my uncle and the little one too, at the cemetery before Christmas to bring flowers. The little one is an 8-year-old younger cousin who died years ago. I can take you to the cemetery, Mama. I'm going out on a limb here. It's an hour's drive to the other end of the city where the cemetery is located if I don't take the highway, which I won't. My father, my grandmother, and my uncle are all buried there to keep each other company, and my little cousin who was run over by a car. We'll need to buy 4 pots of chrysanthemums, my mother says. Chrysanthemums, flowers for the dead, not the living, I remind myself. Valentine had known. Mama, why didn't you tell me that time we went to visit Nonna in the hospital that I shouldn't bring her that pot of chrysanthemums? They're flowers for the dead. My mother's face flushes. She begins gathering up the espresso cups, busying herself so I don't notice her discomfiture. It's just a superstition, she says, sloughing it off. But Nonna believed it. Your aunt took them away as soon as we left, my mother says, as if that had erased the clumsiness of my gesture. Why can't you open your mouth and speak? I say angrily. Say what you want to say instead of always being afraid of upsetting someone. Why have you always tried so hard to spare our innocence, to protect us from everything? My mother looks at me bewildered, hurt. Maria Rita, she says, you never spoken to me like that before. There is a knock at the door for which I am grateful, the serviceman from the gas company. On inspecting the furnace, he finds a faulty fan belt, replaces it, and quickly leaves. The house, when I leave shortly after him, is already warming. My mother is smiling happily, my previous outburst forgotten. Everything is as it should be, as it has always been. My mother comes to see me off at the front door, watches as I put on my jacket and slide into my high leather boots, tucking in my jeans. With those boots and pants, my mother observes, shaking her head, you look just like a man.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, everyone. That was great.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Have a great night. Bye.
Great to see you.
Good night.
Thanks, Lee.
Good night.
Good night.